Okay. Good afternoon, everybody. I have the doubtful honor of being the person that keeps you from drinking beer. Oh no, Samuel's going to say something afterwards, right? So that's fine too. But so this is a talk. So did anybody of you see the opening keynote that Kim and I did last year? Oh, cool. There's one. Thank you for coming back. So the funny thing is there was a talk about what Agile was not supposed to be. And this is not a talk so much about Agile. I'm going to bash it a little bit, but so Kim and I both went in directions and where we took it. Kim did a talk earlier on where her company went with it. And this is a talk basically about where I took my clients to. And I'm hoping it will sort of help you get unstuck too if you are stuck. So we're going to start a little bit. We're drinking some water. That's supposed to be better. So let's talk a little bit into quality, right? So quality is an interesting aspect to the work that we do. So if you look at quality in a regular perspective, like if you go to the supermarket and you go and buy some coffee, so what happens is they put the most expensive coffee, it's the trick they use, at least in the Netherlands where I'm from, to put it at eyesight, right? So that's where you say, oh, that's the one I want, because that has the best quality. It also has the highest price usually, right? Because it's exported from far away, being roasted by very good machine, whatever they do, right? I don't care. So the cheap coffee is always at the bottom, right? And it's supposed to be less in quality. By the way, it isn't always. You know what I learned about supermarkets, by the way, is that they place the eggs in places that you don't expect them to be. And they do that, so you walk around the grocery store or the supermarket to find the eggs, and in the meantime, put all sorts of other stuff in your cart. That's something I learned last week. It's really cool. Also, if you look at buying cars, you expect that the more expensive the car gets, the more quality it has, the more features it has, right? The better tires, my car is basically an iPad with wheels, and that costs basically, right? If you want an iPad with wheels, they're expensive. They're going to be cheaper, by the way, soon. But so this car, I found this in a showroom a couple of weeks ago. It's really cool and really, really expensive. It was so expensive you couldn't even buy it. That's what we expect from quality, right? And we tend to try and find a balance in how much money are we willing to pay for how much quality, right? We all do this all the time, right? And me being Dutch, that means I try to be cheap, so I go to the Lidl all the time and I buy everything there. But it's a matter of finding the right balance between, okay, I want these and these and these features from the product I'm buying, and that I'm expecting to pay so much money for it. If I'm willing to pay it, that's fine. The problem is with software, and we are in the software world, right? Quality is very many things, basically, right? It's not just price versus how good is the quality, because it's all about all of these. It's about security and performance and compatibility and usability. All this stuff is in there when it goes about quality. So that means whenever you talk about software quality, that is basically very different from the different things you do with it. And it's not necessarily always to have everything to brimful tested or not at all, right? It depends on what you're doing. And therefore, we always try to find the right balance between how much money are we willing to pay for how much quality. And that, of course, depends mostly on what is the goal of the software you're writing. If it's a mobile app to, I don't know what. So the timetable for the trains. Let's say you build a small app for the timetable of the trains. You open up chat. You say, build me an app for the timetable. Here's the URL for the service. Go off and do that. And you put it live in the App Store. Done, right? That's it. You don't care too much about quality. However, on the other hand, if you are working for a large enterprise, which a lot of us are doing probably, that means that software usually needs to last for a very long time. So what's the, just a show of hands, what's the oldest software that you have in your company? Is it older than 10 years? Is it older than 20 years? See? Older than 30? Does anybody have that? That would be awesome, actually, by the way. So, but Actually, a lot of companies have software that's been running almost for half a century. If you're a big bank, insurance company, government agency, they will have that, basically. And that's where quality means a very different thing, right? So there's always something. And then the question is, if quality is so important, and we pay so much attention to it, then how come that a lot of companies get stuck in what they do? And I'll give you some examples about what getting stuck means. First of all, companies get stuck in a thing called technical debt. You don't have that, right? Who does not have technical debt? See? Well, you, good, lucky, yeah, go, get out. Just kidding. So technical debt is an interesting thing. So here's a quote by Ward Cunningham. And Ward Cunningham is sort of the inventor of the phrase. This is literally his quote where it sort of got coined. He said, well, shipping first-time code is like going into debt. A little debt speeds development, right? That's what we do. We all cut corners. And we do that consciously, I hope, right? Not unconsciously, like, I have no idea, just, I don't know if this works, just put it into production. I did that about a half an hour ago. My tests were sort of succeeding, and I'm like, well, just see if it lands in production. So if the website of my company is now broken, could be. But you usually pay it back with some refactoring. Right? If you don't do that, you get into trouble. And this is very well explained by Ward Cunningham. He says, entire engineering organizations can be brought to a standstill under the debt load of an unfactored implementation. Whether that's object-oriented or otherwise, procedural, functional, microservices, doesn't matter. Serverless, whatever you do, doesn't matter. You can get stuck anywhere. And the question is, where does it come from? Well, I'll give you some examples. So here's an interesting example. In 2014, I started working for this insurance company, and this is their actual building. And they were at this point where they said, well, we have a lot on-premise legacy. They had it in a mainframe. Now, this being an insurance company and my country being mostly below sea level, they actually put the mainframe on the 4th floor in the building, right? That was quite an operation, but they managed to do that. They couldn't get it out anymore, so they couldn't replace it. They also could not upgrade the operating system anymore. And then they have run all of the software on this piece of machinery. They have 18 million lines of COBOL and 12 million lines of Java. I'm not really sure which one is worse, though, but so this is the COBOL part. It's really interesting because this is actual a screenshot from the code. So it's in Dutch. Who does that, by the way? So this company actually being very CEO-driven, I would say. The CEO said, no, all our code needs to be in Dutch. That's also in Java, right? They say like get and then some Dutch word. Pointless, but anyway, they did that, meaning you could not read this if you don't know how to do Dutch. Even if you know Dutch, and there's about 20 million people in the world that do that, a small portion of them being programmers, and a very small portion being COBOL programmers, it's all abbreviated because they did not have enough space to put variable names back then. Now, how do you read this stuff? And then the problem was hitting, right? Because their programmers at some point needed to retire. They were in their early 60s, meaning if they wouldn't get rid of these systems, they would be in deep trouble. And they were, by the way. That's when they hired me. And now they are in even deeper trouble. So, about e-commerce, right? So this is my current client. This is the chief marketing officer and the CEO of my current client. I'm freelance. And they said, can we be in your deck? I said, sure. So I took their picture. Doesn't mean anything. It's just they wanted to be in the deck. So, and this is their problem, right? They started this e-commerce company 15 years ago with one deal on a web page, with an Excel spreadsheet behind it to do all the administration. Worked for a bit, and then they grew. And when they grew, they added all these systems to the landscape. They had a website and a mobile app, and then they started to build the next website. Of course, the project was called Next, because all projects are called Next, right? And then they were like, oh, you know, we're going to do microservices in Python in this case. Nobody could understand what the names of the services were because they were from some list that somebody invented. And then they put everything, and it needed to connect to all sorts of external parties like payment providers and all this stuff. As a result, they figured out that it was a good idea to copy data everywhere. Right? So they did that with CSVs, they still do. They send each other emails with CSVs attached and import it into the other system. And then they built an ESB and they built all sorts of stuff on top of it. So the data got everywhere, but the sync was even worse. And then they were doomed. They could not release the mobile app and the website anymore, so they could not innovate anymore. Marketing, almost all of them quit, right? Because they got totally stuck. They could not do anything anymore. So they went into this state of what I call technical death. And technical death is not a good place to be in. It's the place where you spend all your people, all your time, or from a manager perspective, all your resources on just staying alive, not being able to innovate anymore, anywhere. This is where companies go bankrupt, literally. I've seen that happen. Usually the companies I work for. No, just kidding. Only a few of them. So, but the real problem is this, right? So the question is, why does this happen? And people say, well, it's because we have monoliths, right? That's the reason. We have monoliths, so we are doomed. Not necessarily. Monoliths can be fine, actually, as long as you can make them more modular. As my good friend Simon would say, modular monoliths, fine, that's good. Yeah, but we have lots of legacy. I'll show you some legacy later on. This, by the way, is the Pantheon in Rome. It's 2,000 years old. It still functions. I don't imagine my software will still function in 2,000 years, even if I would put 6-meter concrete walls around it, right? And then people say, no, but yes, it's the dependencies that kill us. Yes, they do, actually. This is the landscape of one of my clients in the Netherlands. This is just their customer service department, by the way. Every rectangle is a system. They got to the point that they could not release anything anymore because they needed to release the whole landscape at once. They could only do that once a year. This is a public transport company, by the way. And the thing is, it's not us. It's not the techies. And we get to blame, of course, but we're not to blame because it's always the organization. Or basically, it's mostly the culture. I'll give you one example of this. I found this quote in a thread that I was writing something on LinkedIn. I do put nasty stuff on LinkedIn every now and then. And there's this person responding to it. He's a senior software engineer at C++ wearing a suit. Somehow that doesn't add up in my mind, but anyway. And he says, it's not an effective use of senior developers' time to handle tasks that can be done by a junior or mid-level developers. Yeah. And you shouldn't bother senior developers with the stuff that juniors does. How do juniors ever become senior then in that case, right? This smells like not the right culture to do software development, right? But how do you know? And the question is, so what do you do if you are in technical death? Well, you call me. No, not necessarily. There's other people who can solve this too, but I do this stuff for a living. So this is me. I'm an independent dad. Actually, my youngest son will leave the house next week. My life is going to change tremendously, actually, so after this week. So I speak a bit, I write a bit, I travel a lot, and I'm the CTO for this e-commerce company called iBoot, which is unfortunately not active in Portugal. So I'm not here to advertise anything good, right? So, but basically, I'm a lifelong programmer. I've been writing code since 1978, making money with it since 1987. It's quite cool, right? And as you can see, I am basically a programmer because I'm double object-oriented. It gets worse. This is where I live. I live in a Java street in Amsterdam. This is from my apartment, basically. And I do a bit of open source. This is our TypeScript framework for doing Microsoft. So, getting unstuck. What does that mean? How do you get away from this? Well, the point is you need to figure out what to do. And I can at most explain to you what we did. That doesn't necessarily mean it works for you. So I'm always saying, here's the just sharing principles. Oh, that sounds terrible. So here's what worked for us. That doesn't mean it works for you. But you know what? Maybe you can get inspired. So here's the problem. We need to get into this mode of what I call continuous renovation. You cannot just say, I'm going to continue just repairing the systems we have all the time, because then you can never get any further than you were, right? You can also not say, from now on, I'm only going to innovate. Because then, well, basically if you're in e-commerce, well, your whole system will come to a standstill, and you will break, and you will go bankrupt. So you need to find this balance. And the balance is between keeping everything running while you innovate away from technical debt, and also something called Innovators Dilemma. So the only way to do this, there's only one remedy to do this. In every company I've worked for in the last, decades, this is the strategy to go. It's about taking small steps, right? And let me explain that to you by this thing called John Gall's law, or Gall's law, actually. John Gall said, a complex system that works has always started as a small system that worked. Just thinking that you can build the next big system that does everything in the kitchen sink and make it work is a fallacy. It's not true. It's never happened, and it will not happen. So if you want to start again, next to keeping everything alive, you need to start building something small again and grow it in small steps. This is exactly what went wrong with the insurance company. They had already tried 6 times before we started in 2014 doing something really different to build the next big system. The company was so bad that they even were, the CEO was basically a dictator. He actually created all the data models in the company. So this is the richest insurance company in the Netherlands, right? They fired him by now, but that was because he couldn't keep his hands to himself. That was a different problem, actually. So, yeah, that was not the nice part about this thing. So the thing is, you need to start over small again. And here's what we as developers, well, this is where we actually are to blame for, right? We always do this, right? We do not do these things because they are easy, because we think they are easy. And we do this all the time, right? It's just what we do as techies, is we see something like, oh yeah, this could work, we'll do it in a week, done. And the managers think the same, right? They say, well, how hard can this be? Have you had a manager that says that? If you don't have it, if you've never had a manager that says, well, how hard can this be? Then raise your hand. See? That's what they think. So if we also think it's easy, we're doomed. That's the problem, right? So, but software is actually very complex. Now, here's the model that I'm going to show you that will help you get out of this trouble with your managers. Because this is in a book, right? I'm probably the only talk today that does not have a book cover in the slides, but yeah, maybe I should add one. So this is the Kneffen framework. Have you seen it before? I'll explain it to you in about 2 minutes, probably. So the Kneffen framework contains a number of contexts, and depending on the problem that you have, in which of these contexts it is, you have to choose a different strategy. Now, if you are in a clear context, meaning there is a well-known best practice for the problem at hand, choose the best practice, implement it. That's the easy stuff, right? You can even do this with Scrum. And then there's the complicated context, where there might be a bunch of good practices, but you still have to choose and figure it out which fits best. So you do a SWOT analysis or whatever you do, you compare them, and you choose one, you implement it, and you're good. This is what most managers think that we are in software development. And I tell you, we're not. Well, if you are, you could be if you've been running a COBOL team for the last 30 years. I work with such teams. They actually can predict up to the minute almost how long they're going to take to build the next feature. It's really cool, except that their features are all on black screens with green characters, which doesn't really work in the web age, right? So, and then there's this thing, the complex context. This is where you don't exactly know if there are any good practices available, so you have to figure that out. They might evolve from what you're doing, which is really good. But that does mean a strategy, you need to choose a strategy that fits this, and that's called probe, sense, respond. It's about experimentation. By the way, if you're in a chaotic context, you're basically screwed, because that is where you have no idea where to go. The only way out there is just do something, right? Make sure that you do something and find your way back to the complex context. This is a highly valuable model, because in software development, we're mostly here, right? And as soon as you realize that, you figure out, so what do we do then if we are here? Well, what we do is, and this is what Liz sums up pretty well, we are basically here. We are in, somebody might have done this, but not in our context. So our context is different. Or nobody's done this before, right? At this insurance company, I said in late 2013, early 2014, let's do microservices. And then the CEO said, what are they? And I explained as good as I could, because I hadn't done it before. Nobody did, right? I just heard the thing a month ago at a conference. And I explained to him, and he said, let's do that. And I'm like, ooh, now what? Now, this is where you are mostly, right? And then Dave Snowden, the author of this framework, he basically says this. If you are in the realm of unknowables, this is always the best place to impel innovation. Now, what does that mean? I can tell you what innovation means. It means you go off and experiment. And here's the thing. This is what I like about Jeff Bezos. There's a lot I don't like about him, but this is something I do like about him. He says, to invent, you have to experiment. Duh. And if you know it's going to work, it's not an experiment. That is very different things. That is thinking that you are in the complicated zone. Then he says, most large organizations embrace the idea of invention, but are not willing to suffer the string of failed experiments necessary to get there. So they don't allow experimentation. If you don't allow experimentation in small steps, you are never going to get out of here, right? If you have technical debt, it's just going to grow. And at some point, you're just going to die. Basic law of nature, you need to experiment. Experimentation, again, this is from Wikipedia, I think, is a test done in order to learn something to discover if something works or is true. Or does not work, and we should try something different. And here's the problem with it. If you don't act, if you don't experiment, time passes by. In a continuous renovation mode, if time passes by, you're still screwed. Right? So you need to make those decisions. And that makes us all a cottywomble. I'd never heard of it before. I found this on the internet. Pretty cool. But this is basically what my life is about. This is what I do. I travel purposefully toward an as yet unknown destination all the time. This is not my life as a software developer. This is basically my life. Right? I have no idea how much beer I'm going to drink tonight. Stuff like that. So how do you do that? Well, you take small steps. And there's a very nice picture that explains why you need to take small steps. And that's this one, right? There is no better explanation than this, right? Just remember this thing. There's one more slide in the deck that I need you to remember. I'll tell you when we get there, if we ever get there, by the way, but, and I'll show you. So this is what we did. And this is what I keep on repeating with a lot of the clients that I work with over the past, let's say, 10 to 12 years. It is, stop doing projects. Projects are not worth it. They're too big. They only succeed in the end. That's typically what a project is for, right? And if you make them too big, you will fail. Typically in software development, because we are in the complex and chaotic zones, right? So you need to stop doing that and just deliver features. Small. Also, in very short cycles. If you think you're in short cycles, if you're doing Scrum in 2-week cycles, maybe 3 or 4 weeks, that's not short. Short is 20 minutes. Short is delivering to production 50 times per day. Is anybody of you delivering more than 1 time per day into production? Wow, cool. We do, actually. My team says that we do that 50 to 80 times per day. I don't believe them. I think it's 50. Still a lot, right? So, and the question is, why? How do you do it? Does it make sense for everybody? Not for everybody, but it does make it for us because we're e-commerce, so we need to be rapid. You can also do that in very different team setups, and I'm going to show you a bit about these team setups. And the last part, this is the part I'm going to skip because I can talk about this for days, is the part about building smaller components and microarchitecture and stuff like that. But it doesn't fit into 50 minutes. So let's see what we do here. So the big difference between the chaotic zone and the complex zone is that you have a sense of direction. A sense of where do you want to be in 3 to 5 years' time, or maybe a shorter horizon, like where do we want to be next time around this year? Well, here basically, of course, but next year is the 10th edition, which means there's going to be a bigger party probably. So that's good, right? So I want to be back next year. So this is what we did. I went to the management team, and they're here, and I said, where do you guys want to be in 3 to 5 years' time? And they said, well, we want to have higher margins and higher revenue. Good. I'll build you some software for it. It's called Excel. And that didn't really work well. But so they need to make choices and need to figure out what to do. What to do and where to go, right? So the problem is, and that's the problem we have in tech. This is, by the way, not that other important slide. This is also a very important slide, by the way, is that you can only spend your time once. So if you're in my room, you cannot see the other talks, unless you go and see the other talks. But so you need to figure out how to spend your time. This is not just about software development, right? This is about life, right? Spend the time on the things that are worthwhile to you, not to your manager, not even to your, no, I'm not going to say that because, is Kim in the room? No, she's not. Anyway, so this is what we did. We figured out what the dotted horizon was. So this is from my current client, right? And they said, well, you want to be Europe's leading deal site. Well, we're not, because we're not active in Portugal, for instance, right? So that gives a sense of direction. So for me, as the CTO of the company, I need to know if we do this, if this is actually one of our goals, then I need to build my software multilingual, right? I need to be able to generate or translate content in many languages, in multi-currencies, even in multiple time zones, which is stupid. Time zones are, the person who invented time zones should be dead, right? But he is probably by now. I'm assuming it's a he, but it's a stupid invention. And then connecting our community, which means we have to pay attention to the people who like us. This is a stupid e-commerce company. They have fans. We have moderation on the website, on the comments. These are volunteers. The CEO takes them out to dinner once a year, and they're really happy with it. I don't know why they do, but it's a community. It lives, so we need to keep on living. So I built a whole new comment system, and they liked it, which is good, right? This is the thing you need to figure out. Where do you go? Because it gives direction to what you're doing. And then you need to figure out how to spend your time. So we do this. We spend 70% of the time getting towards the dot on the horizon. These are the strategic topics that that come out of what we call the tech board. 20% we spend on building smaller features into existing systems. New stuff, but still on the existing systems that we want to get rid of. And 10% is just solving bugs. So on every one of these boards, what we do, or on every one of these levels, I should say, we do this. We make these decisions. So on the tactical level, there's a group of people in the company that together, because we can spend our tech time only once, decides on where to go and what to do. And they answer for every idea that comes in. Everybody can put in ideas, right? This week we had some ideas from the logistics department. They do lots of manual checks, and they said, well, could we automate this? And we're like, how much time does it save? Well, it saves us 1 FTE. That's a person. And I said, okay. That sounds like a good idea. So we put it on the tech board, and we ask these questions to ourselves. And there's the stakeholders from all departments in the company are there. So together, they can figure out what's more important, whether it's marketing, whether the next big thing, or whether it's the logistics project that we're going to work on. So we always ask ourselves, does this project or this topic help us to reach our goal? It's not a project. And if not, we'll just throw it out. Right? Easy as that. We don't have to spend any time on it. If it is, then the question is it actually actionable? Can we actually do this? Or is there some technology or some constraint involved that for some reason we cannot do it now? If so, we'll put it on some maybe column, which comes from GTD, right? Is it small enough? If it's too big, we can't handle it. Then we go back to the person who posted the idea and say, please split it up into ideas that we can actually do. Because we don't want to spend half of the team on a single topic spending like 3 months working on this, because all that time they cannot do other stuff, right? Makes sense. And then the biggest question is, do we need this now? Is this, at this point in time, the best thing to work on? If it's not, we'll put it on the someday maybe column again. By the way, the someday maybe column, I can say that here, right? Everything that goes into the someday maybe column needs to be revisited in about 3 months. We never do. They don't know that. But we never get to that point because we don't have the time. So the someday maybe column gets fuller and fuller with projects or topics that we're never going to work on. Unless my team doubles in size, which I don't want to because I have to write the performance reviews every time. And that's a lot of work. And I don't like it. So this is the tech board. It's a Jira board. I don't like Jira, not at all. I don't actually understand Jira. I have no idea where all this stuff is. But this is the tech board. So these are the bigger topics that we work on. So this is from a couple of weeks ago. Oh yeah, we're working on offer queuing. IBEX is our new platform. And we're working on creating offer content using AI. We do, we're also busy on the returns API. This is almost done now by now. And the next project is the upload stock files, which is something they just started on this week. So that's basically for everyone to see and everyone to vote. So we vote on the stuff that comes in. The second level is working in the same way, but with people slightly less high in the hierarchy of the company, which is a very flat company. These are the 20% topics. They only can get here if we can do it in 2 or 3 days. If it's too big, they have to move it there, and the chances that they'll go through there are very tiny, right? So they try to push it into this board. And we spend 20% of our time on this. And this is our Slack channel called Ask Tech. It is that my laptop is on the floor. Otherwise, I could show you the thing in real time. I don't have the time to do it, but otherwise, I could show you what's on there today. Just stupid stuff that didn't go through, an order that didn't pass, and that we have to push through, stuff like that. And this is the 10% of our time. And somebody recently asked me, that was actually Saunders' boss, who was, well, anyway, it doesn't matter. So he said, well, how do you keep track of the fact that it's actually 70, 20, 10? And I said, we don't. I don't care. It's a rule of thumb, right? It's not, well, 1 week it's 66%, and then we spend 24 on the other one. Doesn't matter much. It's the sort of the arrangement that you have, right? So the next step is shorter cycles. How often did you put stuff in production? I asked that already, right? So I'm going to stop there. So anyway, you recognize this picture, right? Not necessarily my handwriting, but this is well, sort of Scrum, right? You deliver a potential shippable product increment in every X weeks, right? And then there's a lot of ceremonies that go into place to do this, right? Like, oh, we have to estimate them in T-shirt sizes, story points, whatever stupid stuff you do. And then you make sure that it exactly fits the sprint, which it never does, by the way, and that it fits the sprint goal. And after sprint 62, you have no idea how to formulate a sprint goal anymore because you're just doing tiny shit. And it's okay-ish if you haven't done this before. Like, if you come from a historical perspective, that's older than that, right? Then this short iteration, oh, there goes a Scrum fan, I guess, but I'm actually doing this talk next week at Scrum Day Europe. I have no idea why they invited me. They probably haven't seen it before, but so we went from waterfall. I was in this industry in this age. We had a single pass model. It was terrible. These projects failed usually after 3 years. Really expensive. It is good for consultancy companies, by the way. Then we went into shorter cycles and shorter and shorter and shorter until we get to the point that the cycles become so short that most of the stuff that we do in these cycles, we can just throw overboard. And I'll show you that what my team does. We are at that edge. That doesn't mean that you all have to be there. It does mean that you have to look into what is the stuff that we're doing with our time, right? If you're every 2 weeks in a retrospective that takes half the day and bores the shit out of you, ask yourself why you do that. Does it add value? Do I like it? That's a good question, actually. And the thing is, the shorter your cycles become, the easier it is to get feedback. And here's the thing. Most people think that the world ends with doing Scrum. I see still a lot of people, especially in the Scrum community, that say, if you do Scrum right, your project will succeed. Or actually they're saying, if you do Scrum wrong, you will fail. Both are not true, by the way. You can do projects or topics or whatever you do pretty successful without anything from Scrum, and you can also do them very right with Scrum. Doesn't matter. But the problem is, it's the Scrum community, it's the industry that says, oh, you're doing Scrum wrong, here's to do it right. What? There's a right and wrong way to do this? Or are you really doing Scrum? Follow these guidelines to be sure. Somebody else with different guidelines, I'm quite sure. Or is it okay to skip some Scrum events, right? Wrong. No, it is right to skip them. They're boring. Boring is a good argument to skip Scrum events, by the way. So, or this, like, if a team implements Scrum correctly, the framework delivers valuable benefits. Sometimes, yes, not always. That's dependent. Or the Scrum Master is a leader, coach, mentor, and trainer first, and lots of other stuff, right? It's like Superman in a costume. Or even dressed as Superman, I don't know, right? Or this one is the nicest one. It says, well, if you change the core design or ideas of Scrum, leaving out elements or not following the rules of Scrum, we didn't know they were there, right? Covers up problems and limits the benefits of Scrum. This, by the way, last quote, comes from the Scrum Guide. So if you're in this project in Belgium in 2013, and here's your burn down chart, if you do an estimate of all the work in this sprint, and you say, wow, it's so much work, 1,900 something buttons or whatever they have, I don't know. And this is the ideal line, and by the end of the sprint, you still have some work left. And you might say, oh, I'm doing it wrong. And if you have that for the second sprint in a run, yeah, you're doing it very wrong. And the third one, this is where the project manager usually says, you guys are stupid. You either don't know how to plan your work, you don't know how to estimate it, and you don't know how to do it. And that's true. Because we are in the complex and chaotic zones. We are not in those most nice, comfortable ones on the right side. We're on the left side. That is why we don't know this shit, right? So, and then you go again, and then you hire 300 people from some cheap labor country, and you think the project will succeed. It will fail even harder, by the way. That's Brooks' law, basically, in working. So yeah, this is going wrong. So what happens? Well, the problem is with these small projects, because sprints are small projects, is sometimes you finish early. But has anybody had this? That you had all the work done way before the end of the sprint? That never happens, right? If it happens, you're in trouble because you cannot add work to a running sprint, which means you'd probably go to the beach or something. I don't know. I've never had this. Or this. Yeah, we've done all the work, but now somebody has to accept it from the business, and she's on a holiday. We had that with a person called Marjolein, and Marjolein was on holiday, and Marjolein needed to accept a bunch of features, and she wasn't there, and nobody else dared to accept the features. So they just kept open, which means the length of your feedback cycle grows and grows and grows until you have no idea that you ever did this before. That's the same problem you'll have with pull requests. Or you go too slow. This is the usual pattern, by the way, mostly combined with having scope creep, meaning people still add features to the running sprint. It all doesn't always make sense because progress is not very linear. It goes in all sorts of directions, right? Sometimes we have weeks that we have no progress. We're just stuck. It happens. Stuck in our thought process, stuck in not being able to apply stuff, stuck in technology that just doesn't want to do the things you want it to do, and et cetera, et cetera. And that is why doing mini projects is not always the best way to do it. So Scrum does not mean that you're Agile. Also, if you do Agile, that doesn't necessarily mean that you do Scrum, right? So the thing is, teams are different with different behaviors. Every team is different. So there is no single way of working that matches everybody. You need to figure that out, right? So I was in South Africa a couple of weeks ago, 2 months ago already. So I saw these different teams. This is a team of kudus. They work together very closely because otherwise they get eaten by lions. This is rhinos. They're so big that, well, they can just stand in the field with the three of them. Nothing will happen, right? And this is a group of Cape Town developers. Typical setup, right? Otherwise, they're endangered. This is the point. Teams are different all the time. So you cannot just say, oh, just do Scrum and it works, right? But you do want the rapid feedback. Oh, wait, let me say what Alan says, because Alan is a good friend of mine, so I always quote Alan. Alan says, Agile is not a process. Agile is the ability to create your own. This is exactly what it is. Forget all the other bullshit about Scrum and whatever you do. This is what it's about. It's about you creating the process that works best for you. No matter if it works for, doesn't work for other teams or other companies, it doesn't matter. But you still want the rapid feedback, right? And the rapid feedback comes from delivering value continuously. Now, let me show you what Jess Humble says about this. Jess Humble says, if it hurts, do it more frequently and bring the pain forward. We're still talking software, right? So let me just be clear on that. This is about software. So here's the thing, right? If you release a very big thing every 3 months and you say, okay, let's release it, the amount of changes that you have are really, really big. And because they're really, really big, it's really, really hard to test them. It's really, really hard to deploy them, to put them in production, to release all this stuff. And if you do that again, and it will slow you down. You will get longer periods between releases until you only release once a year. And then, if you have competitors, they will move into your field and you will go bankrupt. I had this at a company. They invented the smart thermostat 15 years ago. And they started adding all sorts of stupid stuff on it, like traffic information. This is a device like an iPad hanging on your wall. Traffic information. What? Am I driving my house? It's like, and they spent tons of money on that. And in the meantime, they had no idea what to do. And then other companies come in, like Tado and Google and whatever you have, and the company just killed. They got run over, basically. And yes, the dependencies will kill you. So you need to move to smaller things, deploying smaller things. Because, well, sorry, I'm going too fast. Because this is the other slide that's the most important, I think, in my deck. I didn't even make the sentence up. I wish I would. Jason did. And Jason says, missing the bus is not a big deal if you know that there's another one coming in 5 minutes' time. Right? Think about this. If you're writing software, you push it out to production, it breaks. What if you could release just right after that, again, fail forward, right? And if you can do this, it's not really scary anymore, right? If the next bus doesn't come along until the next day, then you have a much bigger problem, right? You need to stay put, which is terrible. So if you release stuff in small branches, in small pieces, it's a lot easier to do because the changes between releasing two of these features is so small that testing it becomes really, really easy. And that is how you roll. You split everything up into small features and release those, right? And that's very different from the big thing. In order to be able to do that, you need to automate everything, right? You need to go into building quality into the product instead of expecting that inspection afterwards, like peer reviews, pull requests, all that stuff, is going to help you. It's not. It's going to slow you down, basically. And that's what Deming says it right. He said, eliminate the need for massive inspection by building quality into the product. That means automate everything. Invest in full CI/CD. This is one of our pipelines from, I took the screenshot 3 weeks ago. I don't remember actually, but this is me pushing stuff to production. And it took 30 minutes to go from my laptop my nice MacBook that I have here into production so customers could see. That's the cycle time you want, because that is when you immediately get feedback. If I've broken the website by checking stuff in while I was listening to the previous talk here, my team will already have fixed it by now. No doubt, actually. Right? This is where you want to go. And the team got your back. That also means you need to do automated testing. You need to test everything, right? It's not just saying, you know what, we'll have some unit tests and then we'll do the rest by hand, having QA people doing this. It's the other way around, right? It's going through having everything tested automatically. The moment I check in my code into the repo, one of our 150 repos, it's already tested on my machine. I know it will work. But we do test it again in the pipeline. We test it all the time, right? And the thing with unit tests, because unit tests has been mentioned before today, they're isolating the work you're testing, right? It's about isolating it from the rest of what you do. Actually, I took it the other way around as well. I started writing smaller functions so I could test them more easily. Most of the functions that I write are single statement functions these days. And that's pretty cool, actually. I like it a lot, actually. So testing is everywhere on your pipeline, right? It's not just in the beginning or in the end with lots of manual interaction. There's no manual interaction in this thing, right? It moves from my laptop into production in 30 minutes, or 18, doesn't matter, fully automated. This is when you can start doing this stuff. So there's stuff like static code analysis in there, right? This is Sonar, and we have on this repo, that's why I took this screenshot, of course. The rest of them have like 20% of code coverage, of course. Now, they're all above 80, actually. Also, the new code is all above 80%, because that will break usually. So this is good coverage. It will also check all sorts of syntax stuff, and et cetera, et cetera. This is what you do. And the thing, what it does to the team, it does this. It allows you to code with confidence, right? I'm pretty sure that if all my tests are green on my laptop, I can check in the code, even if it is production code on the basket application that we have. I'm fine with that, usually. So this is it. By the way, the reason that this guy's praying is, well, of course, he's in light mode. Who does that, right? So then you need to go back to Edward's demo, right? You need to think about, how do I build quality in? Well, you need to think about how to shorten stuff. So most of you will probably do pull requests and code reviews, right? How many days are there between when you check in your code and your merge request until they are reviewed and you get it back? If there's more than 1 day in between, you go into context switching, meaning it's expensive. Because when you get back your feedback 3 days later or after the weekend, and you're like, wait, I already started on something else. I need to go back and what I was doing. I don't remember what I was doing anymore. That's how we are, right? And so you could stop doing this if you build all that quality into the place in the first place and you move to something called trunk-based development. Last part. I need to take a sip because I talk too much. So this is about teams, right? Now again, the software we build, we are in the most complex industry in the world. Illustrated very well by Edgar Dijkstra. Dijkstra said in 1984, right, when stuff was still easy. I don't know if you wrote code in 1984, but it's a magnitude easier than it is these days, right? There's all sorts of complicating shit that happened since, like the web and AI and whatever, mobile apps. We didn't have that in 1984, right? The world was nice for us as a developer. He said the program has to be able to think in terms of conceptual hierarchies that are much deeper than a single mind ever needed to face before. Meaning, we are in a very complex industry. This is the tech stack of the company that was doing the smart thermostat. Can you imagine that they went bankrupt? I can. They had 30 people to maintain all this shit. That's terrible, right? So the realization I had from there is that there's so much in this industry that I have no idea about how it works, right? I saw a bunch of talks today and I was looking at it and I'm like, oh yeah, I could if I wanted to, I could probably understand, but I don't now. Right? You've had that too, probably. Otherwise, you wouldn't be coming here. Let's alone the people who do not come here, right? Can you imagine what their world is like? So the thing is, because I don't know everything, I have to work in a team. This is my team. My team actually made me realize that the smallest unit of ownership in software is not the individual. So if you still have individual KPIs about how many lines of code you've written this year, quit. There's no other solution to that, right? That is not what software development is about. Software development is a team sport, right? And Portugal is good at that, by the way. So that is what we need to go to. And then we need to still be able to experiment. In order to experiment, we need to figure out how autonomy works. Now, this has been discussed a little bit already today, so I'm going to do that really briefly. Autonomy for most people is out of their comfort zone. When I joined my current team, I had developers in the team, they said, "What do you want me to do today?" And I'm like, "I don't know. What do you want to do today?" And said, "Yeah, but do you want us to work on the new TypeScript stuff or on the ERP system?" I said, "Well, what's most relevant? You know much better than I because it's your work." And said, "Yeah, but you're the boss." I'm like, "But I don't know. Figure it out." It took me months actually to break through. Now they're at the point that they say, Joyce, the female developer on my team who works mostly on the ERP system, she says, "I'm not going to release the ERP system on Thursday this week because I'm going to go on holiday next week, and you have no idea what you guys are doing if I'm gone." And she just doesn't release, right? That's autonomy, and that's fine. It blocked us in a lot of shit, so I fired her, but But autonomy is really hard to teach, right? It's like, I can teach you, if you want to draw an owl, I can say, well, start with 2 circles, and then you have to figure it out yourself, right? That is extremely complicated. But I figured out this. This is called the Hock principle. This is a guy called D. Hock. And he was the CEO of Visa, and he said, and this is the third important, we're off by naming, we're off by 1 error as we have this in this industry. So this is the third out of the 2 most important slides in the deck. He says, simple, clear purpose and principles give rise to complex and intelligent behavior. That's what you want if you experiment, right? Complex rules and regulations give rise to simple and stupid behavior, right? The more rules you have, the stupider you will behave. That's basically his goal. And then he says this. He says, simplify to amplify. So what I did with most of my teams in the past decade is I took away all the rules and ceremonies that we didn't like. This is, by the way, a crossroads near where I live in Amsterdam. They took away the traffic lights. Why? Well, they wanted to experiment, see what happened. So after 2,000 people were killed, no, just kidding. What happens if you do this? What happens if you do this, right? You know what people do? People start to communicate. There's somebody coming across the road. I usually cross it like diagonally, but nobody does that. So they have to pay attention to me, basically. But I do watch all the other traffic. I look people in the eye and I see, oh, wait, this is your intention, so I'll wait until you're done. And that works. Right? It's the intelligent behavior. Except when there's a tram, you'll wait, right? Doesn't matter if they communicate or not. You cannot say to the tram driver, like, listen, I'm going to go first. You okay with that? No. And then he just goes, right? Or BMW, that's even worse, right? So here's my team. And they all look happy. This is early in the morning, right? So after the first coffees. So this is what happened. We followed Antoine de Saint-Exupéry. Sander Mak, who was before me, also mentioned it, quote, and he said, perfection is achieved not when there's nothing more to add, but when there's nothing left to take away, right? It's the opposite. So this is what we do. We don't do Scrum. And then people say, oh, then you do Kanban. Nope. You cannot do Kanban anyway, by the way. So we don't have sprints, no retros. We experimenting with lesser stand-ups. We don't do them on Thursday, because on Thursday we're on the office, and we're like, no, we just want to work. Fuck off with your stand-up. It's like, that's what Eugene usually says. We don't have a Scrum Master. Well, we don't do Scrum, right? So we don't have a product owner. We are our own product owners. For every topic that somebody picks from the board, they just go talk to the business themselves, right? This is the developers doing that. They didn't want to at first, but I kicked them out. Otherwise, I would need to do it, and I don't want to do it. We don't have stories. We do ballpark estimates, like something like that. We have a very simple architecture. We don't do branching, we don't do pull requests, we don't do code reviews, and we do not blame, right? If I would have broken the code, it could be because I didn't check, actually. So I might have broken the website. They're not going to blame me because I'm the boss. So here's what we do, right? What we do. Anyway, so we do stuff like event storming. We figure out what the process is, how the services align, et cetera, et cetera. We do this with the business. We do lots and lots of mob and pair programming. Not mandatory. Some people in my team don't actually like it, but most of them do, right? And we get together and we look at somebody's code. In this case, Rob is our clear victim, right? And we do lean coffees. We actually were supposed to have one this afternoon, but we didn't, because I'm here now, basically. So it's like come up with a bunch of topics, vote, and talk about it. And these sessions, we do them on Tuesday afternoon. Sometimes they're less than an hour. Sometimes they last the rest of the afternoon, or even into the evening. We don't have a 9 to 5 way of working. We work when we feel like it. Now, that sounds too soft, sorry. We do work a lot, actually. We work very, very hard. Now, anyway, and we figure out what small problem we're solving. So I'm going to go to the end, because I only have like 15 seconds, but I'm going to make it this time. So the thing is, from these 3 boards that we have, people are free to decide what they work on. And the good thing is, in my team, which together have all the skills that we need to bring this forward, 2 different work items usually do not require the same skill set. So people will distribute over the items that we work on. And they do that themselves, right? I have nothing to say about this. Or actually, it sort of goes like this, right? Somebody is done with what they're doing and they're saying, oh, I'm going to pick up this from the tech board, the general board, or whatever. And it happens a lot, this, right? And they say, oh, I'll pick it up. And somebody else says, you know what, I'll come and help you out because this is complicated, or I want to know something about this, or I can help you because I do know something about this. They sit together, they discuss, they go and talk to the business, they do the work. And when it's done, they check it in, or even before in smaller pieces, and they disband. And that happens over and over again. So it's highly organic. And I have nothing to say about this. I'm just part of these teams. So some examples. This is an ops guy and a developer. It's a Java developer because he has a beard. Here is 3. This is my current team, right? Two backenders and a front end. They actually do everything all, but Francisco is I think he's a little bit tired. Probably drank too much the evening before. But so, or this one is also nice. This is 2 developers and a tester. The tester has to stand, right? That's why you are a tester for. This is it. Or this one is also nice. If you're an architect, you pray for it to work, and the developer already knows it doesn't. So this is a highly organic way of working together. So I'll round it up in about 30 seconds. And then Samuel can take it on again. And so this is it. We, and software, we are mostly on the left side in this diagram. If you're on the right side of this diagram, doing COBOL for 30 years in somebody's basement, you're fine. Right? Don't worry, your boss will tell you what to do. But if you're on the left side, you will need to figure this out. You also need to figure out how to do this. For most companies that are in this trouble, they need to move towards something called continuous renovation, right? Innovate, but keep everything alive as well, and keep people happy by adding small stuff, not necessarily in the 70-20-10. It could also be 60-30-10 or whatever you find, but you need to realize that you can only spend your time once. Meaning, stop doing projects. It means build small features. Do that in really, really short cycles. Make them as short as possible because that's where you get the best feedback. Also, think about how you work in teams. That includes, do I do all these practices from the Agile methodologies or just throw them overboard because they don't add value anymore? Or maybe they do. That's also fine, by the way, right? And the last thing, which I'm not going to touch on. So the main motto here is simplify to amplify. Take out everything what doesn't work for your team, that does not add value for your team. And I'm not talking about people, well, also maybe, but I'm talking mostly about procedures, rules, ceremonies, tools, etc., etc. Everything you don't need, just throw it out. It makes you actually a lot happier. And then you can go to solve a single problem every day. By the way, you can never, ever stop learning in this industry, right? I've been in this industry for such a long time, and there's not a day that goes by that I don't learn anything, right? I'm not 100% sure what I learned today, probably that I'm over time again, but that's the thing. But we have the opportunity there because we are in the best industry in the world, right? There's nothing better than to be a software developer. My youngest son once said, Dad, if you wouldn't know how to write code, what would you do? And I was like, I would learn how to write code as fast as I could. And that's basically it. And if everything else fails, by the way, there's only one solution. You remove the node modules, and you do an npm install. Thank you for being here, and I hope you enjoyed the beer.
This is our moment to remind the world who we were and where we are.